welcome everyone to the California Black Health Network's Health Equity Forum. I'd like to thank all of you for coming today, along with our special guest and our sponsor, which is Grail Today, and you'll find out more about them and what they do later on in the program. Today, I'm really happy and excited about the event. It's our inaugural session of the California Black Health Network Health Equity Forum, which is a series that features subject matter experts and advocates in public health, health equity, and health disparities. So you can join our mailing list to stay tuned about what other events are coming up over the next few months, or you can visit our website on the events page to stay up to date on the latest events and activities that we're offering. I want to mention just a few housekeeping things before we get started. Everyone will remain muted throughout the duration of the session. If you have a question, please enter it in the Q&A box, not the chat box. And if you like, we suggest that you set your view settings to speaker mode for the program. And so before we get started, and for those of you who may not be fully aware of and completely acquainted with the California Black Health Network, I'd like to share a bit of information about who we are and what we do. And so the California Black Health Work has been around for more than 40 years. We started out as really a chapter and affiliate model across the state and expanded statewide in about 1980 with a statewide conference, and in 1983 we became an official 501c3. We also have been very instrumental in supporting other organizations and their beginnings, such as the Office of Multicultural Health and the California Pan-Ethnic Health Work, otherwise known as CPHEN. So we are the trusted voice and resource for Black Californians, and we are the only Black-led statewide organization that advocates for health equity on behalf of African Americans and Black immigrants here in California. And through our work, we really aspire to be a California and a place where every African American, regardless of what they do and who they are, has the opportunity to live long, healthy lives that are free from violence and health inequities. And our mission, every day we work to ensure that all Black Californians, regardless of their education level, their economic class, where they live, who they love, who they identify as, or what country they're from, really has access to high quality, equitable primary and behavioral health care and avoid unnecessarily succumbing to any diseases. And so I've been waiting for this moment for quite some time. I am really excited, not only about the beginning of the Health Equity Forums, but about our special guests that we have with us today. Jeri Lacks is the granddaughter of Henrietta Lacks, but she's so much more than that. She is an advocate for health equity and a powerful voice in sharing and telling her grandmother's story. She's a devoted daughter and mother. And most important, she's just an amazing human being that I'm really honored to have as a friend. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce to everyone Jeri Lacks.
Well, thank you, Rhonda.
Jeri, it's so nice to see you today. And so I know that many people are familiar with the book and the movie, thanks to Oprah Winfrey. But I thought it would be helpful to kind of tell the story behind the story. So can you tell us a little bit about your Aunt Deborah and her tenacity in really getting your grandmother's story told?
Oh, yes, she definitely had the tenacity. Aunt Deborah, when she was little, she wanted to know who her mother was, because she died when she was a toddler. Her brother, David Sonny Lacks, which is my dad, and her brother, Zachariah, they were all toddlers when their mother had passed. And the only the immediate family who had knowledge of Henrietta was Deborah's older brother, Lawrence Lacks, and her father, Dave Lacks. But they really didn't talk about Henrietta's death because they didn't want to, I guess, relive the experience that they went through, seeing Henrietta's pain and what she went through when she passed away. So I guess going through life, as a young girl wanting to know about your mother, you know, what did my mother like? What did she dislike? How would she talk to me? How did she smell? What was her favorite dish? What would have cooked for me if I was a little girl, if she would have talked to me about boys? You know, these things just kind of ran through Deborah's head. And I'm just going to kind of go fast forward into when Deborah met Rebecca. Rebecca was 18 when she found out about the story of Henrietta Lacks. I mean, she wanted to know so much about Henrietta, but it was no information there. She wanted to know about Henrietta. She wanted to know about Henrietta's family. Deborah wanted to know about her mother, and she definitely wanted to know about her sister that was hospitalized in a mental institution, and she died there. So Deborah wanted to know more information about her sister. So we said it was a divine intervention when Deborah and Rebecca actually met with one another. And it wasn't an immediate connection. It took Rebecca at least a year to actually gain Deborah's trust, as far as, you know, trying to get information from the family, trying to do this research, because so many times we have, you know, the family had people come to us, especially people, you know, Caucasians, come to the family, get information, but would not give information to the family. So Rebecca was the one who actually, you know, passed along information as she found out about Henrietta. She would pass it along to Deborah. She would send Deborah articles that she may have wrote or she may have found to Deborah, just to let Deborah know, I'm here to help you. I'm not trying to take anything from you. I just want to help you find information about your mother and find information about your sister. And I want to find this information as well. So Deborah and Rebecca took this, I guess, like 10 years, like a 10-year journey to do research, to, you know, to write this book about Henrietta. And not only just Henrietta, just talk about the family's journey, their struggles, and particularly Deborah's struggle as far as, you know, trying to learn information about her, her mom. And I just want to put this in there because I know if Deborah was here today and see all that the recognition that her mom is finally receiving, I mean, she would just be elated. I mean, she would be on cloud nine. Deborah, she always had this fantasy about buying the RV. And I know Deborah, she would be in her RV traveling from one state to the next state, talking about her mother's story. And I just think, you know, it's just wonderful, and, you know, proud that Henrietta is finally receiving the recognition that she actually deserves.
I'm sure Deborah is smiling down from heaven on all that has been happening over the last few years. And so that's your Aunt Deborah's story, but I want to have you, you know, share your perspective on your grandmother's story. And there's one thing that I'd like you to do, and, you know, and start that storytelling with, and that's something that you wrote a couple of years ago about your grandmother. And I think it tells the story for sure, but it's also very powerful words. So if you don't mind, can you start by reading the bookmark?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I did this bookmark. It was my way of honoring my grandmother, educating the world about her story, because I wrote this bookmark almost like several years ago, probably like a couple of years before the book even came out. And it was like a snippet of her life as a human being and as a medical miracle. And it's titled, Who Am I? As you gain knowledge, all will become clear. You ask, who am I? Be a daughter, wife, mother, or friend. I am just an ordinary woman, a wife to my husband, mother to my children, and a friend to the world. I became ill and departed this earth at an early age. Through my death, I became a medical treasure. I am the one who became immortal. Yes, the first immortal human cell. Say the word everlasting. Read about me. I am the one who helped Dr. Jonas Salks, yes, him and I, saved millions of lives by creating the polio vaccine, the disease that had killed and sickened millions of children in the 1950s. Say the word immunization. Read about me. I am the one who was at the right place at the right time when a scientist accidentally poured a chemical on me. Yes, to their surprise, humans have 46 chromosomes in the human body, not 48. Say the word genetic diagnosis. Read about me. I am growing indefinitely frozen for decades, shared among science, and remained the most widely used cell line in biomedical research. Say the word, divide and conquer. Read about me. I am the one in you and you in me. Did you get vaccinated for the polio? Did you get in vitro fertilization? Receive radiation treatments or medication for cancer? Took medicine for HIV? Received the vaccine for HPV? Yes, I am responsible for helping thee. I was snipped and placed in a petri dish, which I really did not know. I am constantly helping mankind from the very first day I departed this earth, which I really did not know. I became intriguing to the medical world, which I really did not know. Even though the world lacks, L-E-C-K-S, the full understanding of who I am, time gives us the opportunity to gain or lose. All that I have done and everywhere I have been, the world will gain knowledge through the telling of my story. I am Henrietta Lacks, responsible for the masterpiece, Healer Selves. Read about me. And like I said, it's just a snippet of, of her as her as a woman, and then her as a medical miracle. And when I say, say the word, read about me, like, became immortal. She's everlasting. When I said, the polio vaccine, people are getting vaccinated with the polio. Then when I was talking about, the chromosomes and how you can determine what defects that you may have as an infant, and then that she has been frozen for decades, but yet her cells are still being used to this very day. Even with the COVID vaccine, they used her cells to study the virus. So it's just pretty amazing how she is continuing to help help everyone, not just a chosen few, but just help the world. And it's just
right.
So
yes, it's truly a miracle, and definitely one story and a remarkable story of how one woman has really saved the lives of millions of people around the world. And so obviously, knowing all that was your inspiration for writing what you shared with us. But are there any other things that you'd like to share, or your perspective on your grandmother's story and the impact that she's had, not just on the medical community, but on all our lives?
Let me just say, we go out and when I say we, the Lacks family, some family members go out and do speaking engagements. And sometimes when we have these speaking engagements and when it's over with, we have people that would come up to us and say, if it wasn't for your grandmother, I wouldn't be able to have a family because I was able to do in vitro fertilization. Or somebody may come up and say, your grandmother saved my life because I received treatment for cancer. I mean, it's just, just a warm feeling knowing that people finally recognize who Henrietta is and what she has done for everybody. I mean, even people that's on, listening to this, some way you have benefited from her cells being used. And I just, I guess, I don't know, just lost for words, because it's just amazing. This one tiny cell from this tiny woman that stood no higher than 5 feet, has been saving the world, been helping. And it's just, wow, just amazing. And then that she has that spiritual nature to her, and just reading the book and listening to other family members speak about her and how she has that dedicated faith. Because I'm not sure, I mean, when you read the book and how they said when she went into Johns Hopkins Hospital, how she would always rub the toe of the Jesus statue, and that tells you right there, I have faith. I have faith.
Right.
I'm a Christian woman. I'm God-fearing, and I know that things are going to be fine.
That's awesome. So I had no idea that she was only 5 feet tall.
Well, I read that in a book, that she was no higher. I mean, and that's the thing. When I read this book, I mean, we have this picture of her, the only picture that we have of Henrietta. with her hands, her famous picture with her hands on her hips. And you look at the picture
Right.
and you was like, oh yeah, she's gorgeous. And then she got a nice suit on, but then you want to know more information. So when I read the book and then hearing other family members, finally speak about Henrietta, and just for them to kind of like give an in-depth description of her, like she stood no taller than 5 feet. She always liked to wear a neatly pressed skirt. She had hazel eyes, beautiful teeth. She smiled. When she smiled, she would light up the room. She loved to make spaghetti. Her hospitality was there. It's just amazing, because now you can kind of put things in perspective as far as looking at the picture, or I can put it in perspective, looking at my grandmother and looking at this picture and just shaking my head and say, wow, you are
Right.
gorgeous inside and out.
What a woman. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
what a woman.
Yeah. So you talked about, the family going out, and I know that you all are very busy throughout the year, doing events and speaking at different venues or conferences and telling your grandmother's story, and, really spreading the word about the impact that she's had on millions of people and around the world. But can you talk about more specifically outside of those events? Like what is the family doing to honor her legacy and carry on her legacy?
Okay, I just want to highlight when Henrietta turned 100, August
Yeah,
the 1st
right.
of 2020, and we did a family-led virtual symposium. It's supposed to have been a conference, but because of the pandemic, we had to switch gears and actually do a virtual symposium with the help of Iris Collaborative, who helped us, strategize a virtual symposium, which was a success. We had a great diverse panel speaking about Henrietta, speaking about health equity, speaking about social justice. We had Dr. Francis Collins, who's the director of NIH. We had Rebecca Skloot, the author of The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. We had Rahul Benjamin, who's a professor at Princeton University. We had Helen Wilson Rowe from London, international person from London, who we met several years ago, who has been a adamant advocate for the Lacks family, who did oil paintings of several family members. My brother and I were on a panel, and it was a great success. And from that moment, from August the 1st until August the 1st of 2021, we are sponsoring events and initiatives that's family led to honor Henrietta, to preserve her legacy, to educate people about her life and her legacy. And if you want to know more, you can go to thelacksfamily.com and healer100.org. I guess we also partnered with the World Health Organization to strategize a plan to eradicate cervical cancer. There's the Henrietta Lacks Enhancing Cancer Research Act that was.
And we'll get to that a little bit later, but yeah, definitely.
Okay. And I guess, once the pandemic is over, we're going to try to do a little more things in person, like a pop-up museum, and the accolades that we have collected for people honoring Henrietta Lacks, and our artifacts that we received throughout our journey. It's just a number of things. Different family members have different projects that they are doing. With Henrietta's story. So it's a lot of things we're trying.
And there's actually some things happening at Johns Hopkins and at a site in Virginia. Do you want to share a little bit about that too?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. Okay, there's a. I'm glad you mentioned that. Okay, it's 2 structures that will be built honoring Henrietta Lacks. One is in Halifax County, Virginia, and that's where Henrietta actually grew up. And where she lived in her final resting place. And it's going to be the Henrietta Lacks Life Science Center. And they want to build a research/treatment center in honor of Henrietta Lacks. Then there's another building that will be constructed at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, Maryland, and it's going to be the Henrietta Lacks, either the Henrietta Lacks Hall or the Henrietta Lacks Building, in honor of Henrietta Lacks. And not only is it just, you know, a building that's going to be built with her name, it's going to be a building that has her personality, that's going to make sure that it's going to continue to help people in that community.
That's fantastic. So hopefully this is.
No, I just wanted to add a couple of other things, just in case, you know, it's Johns Hopkins. They have an annual event, and that's normally the first or second week in October to honor Henrietta Lacks. They have Morehouse School of Medicine honors Henrietta Lacks. Each year, there's the Healer Women's Conference, and they do that at least like the third or the fourth week in September. And they have been doing this.
Which is where we actually met. That's where we actually met.
We did. We did. And then you have the Turner Station event, the Henrietta Lacks event in Turner Station. And that's the first week in August. And that's been an annual event since 1997. That has been honoring the life and legacy of Henrietta Lacks. So, you know, we do have things that other people, but we try to participate or partner with them to make sure that we continue to, you know, preserve Henrietta's legacy and life.
Okay, right. And all the information that you just said, right, is on the website. The lacksfamily.com is what you said?
Lacksfamily.com, but we don't have that information up. You can go to each one of there, like the Johns Hopkins Hospital. You can go there, the Morehouse School of Medicine, but you know, we probably will put it up there. That's a good idea.
Okay, great. And then before I turn it over to the audience to respond to some of their questions, one thing that I think is really important to share is some of the work that you and your brother David have done with NIH. So can you talk about your experience and some of the outcomes that have occurred because of your relationship with NIH and some of the folks there?
With the NIH, it was I guess a historical moment for us. And it's actually 3 family members that actually sit on the HeLa Genome Data Working Group. And it came because a scientist or researcher actually published Henrietta's full genome data on the website. And we was kind of, well, actually Rebecca came to us and asked us if we knew if this was up. And we was like, no, we don't know if that was published or it was public information. So so we was trying to figure out, you know, what does this mean for the family? You know, our grandmother or our mother's information is out there. What does that mean for our family? Will our information be out there? Our information is out there as well. And then nobody came to us to say, okay, do you consent to this? But okay, so we was kind of a little bothered by that. So I guess the scientists received kind of like backlash. So they actually took it down, which we was grateful because they didn't have to take it down because it wasn't illegal, but it just was unethical. But they did decided to take it down because of the story, and they knew what was going on with the Lacks family. So we wanted to have it taken down so we can get some time to kind of think about what's actually going on. What does this mean to the family? Why should this information be privileged to everybody? And our medical information is out there as well. So we had a chance to meet with several people, a genetist, a husband and wife. We got to meet with Dr. Francis Collins, and it was another young lady from the NIH, a couple of people from Johns Hopkins, just to kind of ask questions and for them to hear our concerns and to figure out which direction we can go in to make sure that this information is not public. And we was trying to figure out, we didn't want to stop science because we knew this data helped research. So we didn't want to stop, you know, research from moving forward. So we kind of came up with the idea of, okay, let's have restricted access. So that means that researchers will have to apply to have this information, to have the full HeLa genome data. And it gave our family the opportunity to know firsthand, you know, what the researchers are using this data for, and what their findings would be after they use this data. So, I mean, like I say, so now we in the know firsthand and not being the last person to know what was going on with the with our grandmother's data, even though it's not the cells, but it is the data.
Right. And so the family has the opportunity to say yes or no based on the information that's presented in the application. Is that the way it works?
Well, I mean, it's different criteria that you have to follow with the application. And if we feel uncomfortable, they definitely will let us, we'll definitely let them know, and they will kind of, kind of go with us and try to figure out, what the problem is. But it's different criteria that they have to meet in order for them to move forward to it. And it's not, it doesn't stop at the working group. We still have to go through another committee that the application has to go through.
Okay, but the working group is sort of like the first phase of that process.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Great. All right. So I think I've talked enough or asked you enough questions. Now I'm going to give the audience a chance to get their questions answered. And so our first question is from Channing Fleetwood. And he's saying, it's great to see that Johns Hopkins Medical School honors Henrietta's legacy through letting her story and building, but somebody just deleted that. Oh, hold on, we just got another question in, so sorry. Do you know how or if the institution is incorporating her into the curriculum if it's medical students? One medical university across the world should follow up and do the same. So that is Channing's question.
What? Okay.
Do you know if they're incorporating anything into the curriculum for medical students? So I think that is part. So the HeLa cells are definitely studied as part of the medical curriculum. But if you want to add more to that based on your knowledge about how that works.
I'm not sure if a curriculum has been. I don't think a curriculum has been created. I know high schools and universities and colleges, they are using the book as a first read, as a community-wide read. As far as a curriculum, no, I don't think so.
Okay. So the next question is from Bo Tefu, who's a reporter for California Black Media. And Bo would like to know if what CBHN is doing or thinks about Governor Newsom's effort to partner with community organizations to counter vaccine hesitancy and misinformation in our communities. What challenges do you think the administration is overlooking about health equity and vaccine hesitancy in our community? Well, I'd like to say to Bo, I'm happy to have that conversation offline here, because that's a whole conversation and discussion session all on its own. So I'd like to invite Bo to email us at askcbhn@cbhn.info, if that's okay. Let's see if there's another question for Jeri. Let's see. So Susie Brain says, any suggestions on how we can encourage more members of the Black community to enroll in clinical trials? Any perspective on that, Jeri?
Oh, I guess you just have to, as I know with me, I'm not here to convince anybody to get the vaccine. I think it's people's personal decision. They have to read, have to educate themselves, have to look at the data. And these are things that I'm doing myself, researching, going online, asking people, finding out questions, getting answers to my questions, I guess, and just make an informed decision, and why you want to get the vaccine, what it is that you want to accomplish with the vaccine. We all know that we want to, do our part in making sure that we don't get sick, or make sure our loved ones don't want to get sick. So I don't know, I guess it's more education that needs to be out there. More engagement needs to be given to the African-American community, And I think, you know, I guess with the health disparity, you know, people kind of look kind of hesitant, not only just with the vaccine, with just, you know, just their health period. And I think this is another hurdle or another barrier that we have to break down, so African Americans will get the vaccine and know that this researchers are doing their best to make sure that this vaccine is effective and working for all people, not just a certain group, but everybody.
Right. Right. You're absolutely right. And I'm glad you brought up the topic of health disparities, because when you think about, you know, the level of and lack of participation from people of color, and particularly African Americans, and you know, rightly so, I can understand the hesitancy there, not just with the vaccine, but participating in clinical trials. When, you know, drugs come to market, we don't really know how efficacious they are until they're in market. And so typically all of that happens within the clinical trials. And so sometimes we have seen, especially in some cardiovascular drugs, that they may not be as efficacious in certain populations of people as the clinical trials would indicate. So it's important, I think, on the front end in the drug development process, but also when we're talking about, you know, a situation where someone might be a stage 4 cancer patient and all of the commercially available drugs may not work, and their oncologists may have run out of options. And so that's an opportunity to explore participation in clinical trials that, you know, may be a life-saving therapy or at least extend someone's life. And so it's important, you know, to have those conversations and to understand more, to your point, be much more educated about the situation and what that really means. And with respect to the vaccine, based on what I understand so far, this is probably the first, and Jason can probably speak to this a little bit more accurately than I can, but from what I understand, especially with the Pfizer drug, this is the highest level of participation from people of color, and definitely African Americans. I think the participation in the clinical trials was about 10% for African Americans. And so when we talk about having more confidence that, will this work for me, you know, there is more evidence in this situation with the vaccine. So I'll move on to the next question, and this is Kevin Sitter. And the truth and reconciliation is being appreciated more every day as a means to come to a way forward. You're stating that what it took to establish trust recognizes the need to stay committed. Have any researchers, doctors, healthcare industries apologized for the unsolicited beginnings to use your grandmother's lineage or herself? And has any sustained a relationship with the family, updating the miraculous gifts created due to your grandmother's DNA?
No, no one has apologized. And I think if they apologize, they're admitting a wrong. So no one has no one has apologized as of yet. As far as, it was a second part. I couldn't remember what you had said. It was a lot to take in. The second part you had mentioned about.
Yeah, the second part is, okay, so after the apology, has the family sustained a relationship with any of, I guess, researchers or anyone in the medical community to update you and the family about how they're using your grandmother's DNA? Other than what you've mentioned in your relationship with the NIH.
Right, other than the NIH. I mean, if we have questions, we definitely can go to, I guess, different people, that different contacts that we have, but we don't have an actual relationship with someone that we can, that they would come to us and say, okay, this is what we're doing with your grandmother's DNA or your grandmother's data. No, we don't have that.
Okay, great. And so the next question is from Sheila James, and she wants to know, can you share how the family is involved at the JHU Institutional Review Board and their advocacy to share how Henrietta's experience led to protocols meant to protect human research subjects?
Um, I don't know if a family member is not on the John Hopkins University into
The review board?
institutional review board. No, 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 a family member is not. The only board we're actually on is with the NIH.
Okay. And Cheryl Brown wants to know, do your family members, what is this? Do the Henrietta's family members have her genes? This is an amazing event. So yeah, I would suspect you all have her DNA to some degree, yes. And then
Yeah.
Ashley wants to know, so Ashley says, hi, Jeri, and she thanks you for being here and sharing your family's legacy. So can you tell us or speak about how you think about your grandmother's legacy and how it contributes to the notion that, that the Black community has never really had agency and consent over their own bodies in this country? For example, enforced slave labor, forced reproduction, forced medical experiments.
I'm sorry, Vonda. What was that question?
Yeah, so Ashley wants to know what your thoughts are about the notion that, you know, the Black community really never having had agency or consent over their own bodies. I guess historically, having forced slave labor, forced reproduction, and forced experimental medical procedures happened to them. Do you have any perspective on how you feel about that when that has happened to the Black community historically?
I think that's another issue that we have to address as far as, you know, do we own our own bodies? And who owns our body? Is it us or is it them? And that's another issue that we trying to address and we trying to tackle as a family. And like I said, you know, we just trying to make sure that we advocate effectively. We want to make sure that we know what we're doing so we can advocate for people correctly. And as far as the owning our own body, that's something, you know, it's kind of deep. I really can't, you know, answer that one in a sense.
Okay. All right, no worries. So here's one from Charlotte Barbie. Hi, Charlotte. And she wants to know about your grandmother's legacy. And so one of the most upsetting parts about her story for Charlotte is that her cells were taken and used without her or the family's knowledge and consent. So has that been addressed in your family? Well, I think we all know the answer to this question, but she's asking if your family has been compensated based on the purchase of your grandmother's cells. And she thinks that would be the right thing to do.
Oh, we definitely think that would be the right thing to do. But no, the family has not been compensated. I mean, and then you just have to, you know, look at how Henrietta's cells are being brought and sold around the world. How this is a multi-billion-dollar cell line that people career has been elevated. You got biotechs, you have pharmaceutical companies, you have researchers making money, and still the family has not even seen any type of revenue, even if Henrietta's children receive some kind of medical benefit. So if they were to go to the hospital and they look at their insurance and say, okay, well, your insurance doesn't cover this. Really? It doesn't cover it. It's like my Aunt Deborah said in the book, my mother is so important. Her cells are so important. Why can't the family afford health care? So that should have never been a question, is why Henrietta's offsprings cannot afford health care, even health care. But we try not to look at the monetary aspect or try to focus on, you know, being compensated, even though we definitely think the family needs to see some type of revenue. But we just want to make sure that we get our grandmother's story out there so people can know her story, so people can not their family members could not be another Lacks family member. You know, as far as what has happened to Henrietta, her cells being taken, her cells being taken without her consent or the family's knowledge, and that money has been made off of her cells, and yet the family has not benefited.
Right. Okay, so maybe some reparations there, hopefully sometime in the future. So Tamika Hopkins wants to know if there are any parts of the movie that were not depicted accurately based on the book, I guess.
The book was, the movie was really good. I think it should have been a mini series, because it's like they kind of crammed everything into that, what, hour and a half movie. I think a lot of things were missing. I wanted to see more of my grandmother, more of her story as a woman, more of her story as a medical icon. If anything was, I guess, I think Deborah's role was kind of, because it made Deborah seem like she was kind of overexcited and kind of just off a little bit with in the movie. But that's the only part that I could think of. But other than that, I think the movie did what it's supposed to have done with telling Henrietta's story. It was another platform to showcase Henrietta's life and Henrietta's legacy, as well as the family's journey, particularly Deborah's journey with Rebecca.
Right. Okay, great. So here's a question from Cheryl Brown, who she said she, I guess, lived in Pittsburgh at one point and was one of the first children to receive the polio vaccine when she was a kid. And she says, too bad they didn't tell us about Henrietta's contribution to me and being able to live to be 77 years of age. So congratulations, Cheryl. Thank you for your comment. And Eugene Canson has a question. Did you want to make a comment about?
No. I just see that's what warms our heart when we hear people making statements of how Henrietta has saved their lives or prolonged their life or gave them, an opportunity to have children.
Great. Okay, so next question is from Eugene Canson, and he wants to know, how can community members and health advocates help raise awareness about cancer disparities and honor Henrietta Lacks' legacy?
I guess education, communication. Communication definitely has to be a top priority. With whether it's a webinar, whether it's literature being passed out to the community. It has to be engagement. The community needs to be more engaged with the health industry, incentives. And when I say incentives, it has to be, like a health fair for the community, right, or like some type of free screening, give something to the community instead of, always taking back. So show the community, we're giving to you. So I think communication, education, engagement, and incentives.
Okay. And then, you mentioned, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm finished.
Okay. Yeah. So you mentioned earlier about some of the things that the family is involved in and what you're doing to honor her 100th birthday. So for the audience that's listening today, are there things that they can get involved in and ways that they can support what the family is doing?
Right. They would have to, if they just visit the healer100.org. I had mentioned, and it gives you is a whole list of things, incentives and events that we're creating, and people can participate in those events and those initiatives, and just keep Henrietta's story alive by telling her story.
Right. Okay. So we have a couple more questions before we get back to talking about the Henrietta Lacks Act. So Michelle Burrows wants to know, does the family have plans to advocate or continue medical research for policies that do no harm? So outside of the Henrietta Lacks Act that we'll talk about in just a few minutes, Are there any other type of policies or legislative activities that are on the horizon for the family?
I'm quite sure they will be. At the moment, we do not have any. And I think, you know, Henrietta's story has created policies. As I mentioned, we're going to speak about that, the Henrietta Lacks Enhancing Cancer Research Act policy. But I'm quite sure it's more, because like I said, Henrietta's story has changed people's lives and has changed policy.
Right. So on that note, I would like to talk a little bit about the Henrietta Lacks Enhancing Cancer Research Act of 2019. For those of the people in the audience that aren't aware of it or know this, it was actually signed in December of 2020 by the previous president. So that was a great and a significant accomplishment for the family. So can you talk a little bit about how this came to be and some background on that to share with the audience?
It was in 2019, the late Elijah Cummings had introduced the bill, the Henrietta Lacks Enhancing Cancer Research Bill, because he wanted to address the barriers that were in place or are in place for the underrepresented community. And he wanted to remove these barriers. In his passing, you know, the bill was not passed. The former Congressman Mfume wanted to make sure that the late Elijah Cummings work did not go in vain, and it was a good work, and he just, you know, moved forward with trying to get this bill passed. So the bill was passed in the it was passed in the Senate in 2020, and several days later it was passed in the House. Then the bill became law in January of 2021. And you can see the layout. It's on congress.gov to get, you know, more details about the bill. But I think this is a significant step for our family, that this bill has been named after our grandmother. It's a significant step because this is another way of addressing disparity with the African American communities, and addressing and recognizing and removing barriers that are there for underrepresented communities. And it, you know, we just have to kind of figure out, you know, because I know each community is different, just try to figure out, you know, what it is that these barriers are. It could be transportation. You don't have transportation, or it could be you don't know about the clinical trials, or you can't the participation, you can't participate because of your job. I mean, it could be a number of things that's in place that doesn't allow certain groups to participate in clinical trials.
Right. And I guess the good thing about this is there's some accountability wrapped around this particular bill. And so this is all for federally funded research studies to make sure that, you know, traditionally underrepresented populations are included. And like you said, identify the barriers to participation. And so the good news is that not only does it address barriers, but it also requires the federal government to report back to Congress on what those barriers are and come up with solutions to eliminate those barriers to participation. So this is a great thing, and I think will definitely going forward have an impact, theoretically should have an impact on addressing health disparities and improving that situation when it comes to clinical trial participation. And so you talked about what this particular bill means to the family, but I kind of alluded to this, but from your perspective, what do you think this really means for the Black community?
What it means to the Black community, I guess it's a step forward. It's a step forward in addressing these barriers and having this data on like data on paper to see actually what it is that the community, or what it is that the federal agencies can do to remove these barriers and to address it quickly, so we can participate equally in clinical trials without having, you know, issues with participating.
Great. So I wanted to entertain some questions in case the audience has questions about this particular bill or the Henrietta Lacks Enhancing Cancer Research Act. And also, Jeri, just give you some, you know, an opportunity to just share more about, you know, your final thoughts and what you would like people to really know and carry forward in honor of your grandmother's legacy. So I'm not seeing any new questions in the chat about this specifically, but just so that people will know, we'll send out and make sure that you have access and know what the websites are and how you can keep up with what the Lacks family is doing. But what are some things that you really want to leave with the folks here today?
Yes, just to continue to tell Henrietta's story. And it's not just her story, it's our story, because you touch on the ethic issues, you talk on the medical issues, you talk on religion, you talk on Henrietta's life as a person. And I think you know, that people just need to continue to tell her story, and just to make sure, you know, just to support the Lacks family and whatever initiatives or events that we're creating, or whoever we're collaborating with, just support our family, because we're trying to make sure that we move forward in a positive way to continue to tell our grandmother's story. Even though it was a tragedy, her cells were taken without her consent or without her knowledge, that her family did not know until 20-something years later that these cells were taken, and we was victims of I say malpractice, but we were victims. And we take our grandmother's story and move forward. We use our grandmother's story as a platform to make sure that we advocate effectively for whether it's medical literacy, whether it's for health disparities, social justice. So we just want people to support us, and to make sure that we all do our part in helping each other, and just make sure that, you know, you are an advocate for yourself as well as being an advocate for other people.
Yeah. I do believe it takes a village to end disparities, and you're right. We all need to work together, whether it's the people, you know, or policymakers, or providers, or you know, other folks that participate in the healthcare industry, especially from a structural and systemic standpoint. So we all have a lot of work to do, and really, you know, appreciate all that you and the family are doing to carry forward your grandmother's legacy. And so we do have another guest here today, and I want to give Jason an opportunity to share his perspective and story around his experience with Henrietta Lacks in a different way. And so I'd like to transition to recognize our sponsor today, and thank them again for their support, and introduce Jason Carey, who is the PhD and the medical liaison for GRAIL Inc. Jason is a molecular scientist and medical science liaison, as I mentioned, and GRAIL is actually based in Menlo Park, California, and is working to develop a blood test that can detect many cancers early. Jason has won numerous awards and honors for his research in cancer, and also has worked with and has experience in doing research with the HeLa cells. He is a HBCU graduate from Clark University in Atlanta, and also has had internships at Morehouse School of Medicine and at Duke. So without further ado, I'll introduce and turn it over to Jason to share a little bit about GRAIL and the work that he's been doing there.
Hi, Rhonda, and thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this conversation. Honestly, that was so impressive just to hear everything firsthand that the Lacks family have been through. So I just want to thank you first off. And you gave a bit of my background, and so I won't really get too much more into it. But to say that I do work at GRAIL, a company whose mission is detecting cancer early when it can be cured. And what I want to expand upon that is, the Henrietta Lacks Act is a very impressive first step in addressing the current challenges that face minority representation in clinical research. But there's a step that we're overlooking in this process. And unfortunately, in order for clinical trials are usually late stage cancers. But what we actually need to do are detect cancers first before we can cure them. And so can we go on to the next slide? I have a few slides that just explain what we're doing to detect cancer earlier. So this is just a simple disclosure to let you guys know that I am an employee and shareholder at GRAIL. Next slide. Now we know cancer has become the leading cause of death. Each day, over 1,700 people die each day from cancer. And over 3 times the amount of people learn that they have it. And in California last year, over 60,000 people died from cancer. Now we know the huge toll that this is on the human toll, but there are also staggering economic costs to cancer that we must consider. Next slide. Now, the most significant challenge is that the majority of cancers are found too late, when outcomes are often deadly and late-stage cancers tend to be more difficult to treat. Now, here you see how critical early diagnosis is. With it, nearly 9 out of 10 cancer patients will live 5 years or longer, and without it, only 21% will survive 5 years. And some cancers like lung cancer have a lot worse outcomes. Now, we know that there are screening methods for some of these that you're familiar with, mammograms, colonoscopies, and even cervical cancer, as we've discussed today. And these are gold standard. But what would you do if I told you that we can only screen for 5 cancers, but there are over 100 cancers, different types of cancers? So that tells you that we are lacking in our ability to detect these cancers. Next slide. Now, let me address some of the challenges people of color face when it comes to cancer screenings, treatments, and incidence. Black Americans have the highest rate of death from cancers of any other racial ethnic group. And the Latinx population in this country is more likely than any other to be diagnosed at later stages. Now, the cancer mortality for Black females is 13% higher compared to white females. And the cancer mortality for Black males is stunningly 19% higher than for white males. Slide. Now, cancer often hits the Black community much harder, like take stomach cancer, which does not have any screening methods and disproportionately affects Black Americans. African American men are 81% more likely to be diagnosed with this cancer and 155% more likely to die from it than white men. Black women face similar challenges. This is just one of the countless examples that illustrates the burden of late-stage cancer. And in this reality, Black Americans, they are diagnosed with aggressive cancers at higher rates like liver cancer, pancreatic cancer, and kidney cancer. And in addition, there are no screening or early warning system available for these cancers. So this is where the need lies in developing early detection that can be easily implemented and made widely accessible. Next slide. So at GRAIL, we are trying to use the great equalizer, which is technology. We believe it's an unprecedented opportunity to transform cancer care as we know it. Now, our collective knowledge in genomics, artificial intelligence, and machine learning are giving us new insights into human biology and cancer. And this knowledge tells us that tumors develop and grow, and what happens is they shed tiny particles into the blood, and then these fragments can be detected and identified. And that's where all of the technological aspects come into play. Slide. So GRAIL and other companies have developed this technology with a single blood draw that can differentiate these fragments. And we're headed to a world where we can detect multiple cancers in the blood and identify these cancers. And we're going to get to a point where we can screen for these at an annual checkup in a doctor's office. And that's what we're trying to do so that we can detect these cancers at earlier rates. Next slide. Now, I want to stop here and say there's a lot of work happening to realize this promise of early cancer detection in the blood. But our clinical trial program is well underway with partners in Northern California and Southern California. And Grail's blood test gallery will be available in the second quarter of this year. But what I must impress upon you is that this is a responsibility of us all. This forum today is talking about Black health equity. Well, what health equity means is that we need to have a stake in the conversation, a stake in research, a stake in everything. And that's what this act allows. It's again a first step, but it's a first step in the right direction. So, as Ms. Lacks said today, we have to educate ourselves. And that's always going to be paramount for us succeeding. So yeah, are there any questions? Sorry, Rhonda, you're muted.
Sorry, thank you. So just curious to hear, Santa, the same question that I asked Jeri about your thoughts about not just what this act means for the medical community, but your perspective on what you think it means for the Black community as well.
So I have a very interesting answer to this question. And the question is, what do we as a Black community want it to mean? It's a law that's been passed, but at the same time, nothing will come about it unless we're involved. As I stated, we have to be involved, as you stated, in these clinical trials. We saw COVID had one of the highest participation rates. That's when we'll determine, this gets the ball rolling, but what are we gonna do to get it continually in motion to where we have a stake at the table?
Great. Okay, and can you talk a little bit more about from the medical side of this and the impact that it can have on the medical community?
So I'll generally speak about the medical community. What it ensures is that they're held accountable. But what I can more accurately do is speak for Grail. And we believe that at Grail that Ms. Lacks' legacy obliges us to conduct clinical research at the highest degree of ethics and integrity. So all of our studies, we're making sure that all ethnic populations are being represented. And what we're talking about today was once seen as science fiction, maybe, that you can take a blood draw and detect cancer. But as your point earlier, we need to make sure that we can do this for everybody.
Right. Great. And yeah, so I want to ask you a question. So you actually have had experience doing research with the HeLa cells. So what was that like for you? And share with us that experience and what that was like.
Yeah, so I actually went to HBCU, and when I went to college, I had no intentions of being a cancer anything. But I picked up a job working in the lab, and I want to say, when you see something like a cell in basically growing and dividing, it has a certain presence, and we know the history, we know the lack of acknowledgement that may have occurred, but what it does is it shows us that Henrietta Lacks, as you guys say, she's touched so many lives. And I'll say just personally, just being able to conduct research is what led me to want to get to where I am today, where we're looking to find the cure. And I think that we're on the right path. But we have to acknowledge Henrietta Lacks' contribution. We have to acknowledge everyone's contribution, but we also have to be included in the efforts as well.
Great. So what do you see as some of the barriers or challenges that might prevent us from detecting and treating cancers early, especially in your work with Grail and what you guys are aiming to do?
Yeah, so in order to detect cancer early, we need to have access to this type of technology or all screening guidelines. So there are many barriers, and we can talk about laws being passed but there are challenges in the healthcare system. But we at GRAIL are working to educate and provide those resources, working with primary healthcare partners, healthcare payers, to make this type of technology accessible to all.
Great. And if people want to learn more about what GRAIL is doing, how would they find out?
So my first suggestion would be to go to grail.com, but I also want them to be aware, because like I said, this technology is being released later in the next couple of months, in the second quarter of this year. So what I would actually impress upon your audience is to start having discussions with their primary healthcare providers, and also just understand what's going on, understand their needs for this type of screening and technology, not only just GRAIL's technology, but all screening methods for cancers.
And so it sounds like this particular technology could have an impact, maybe even a significant impact on health disparities when it comes to cancer.
Yeah, so as we touched in the conversation, we as a community are often detected at later stages, and there are a number of socioeconomic reasons for that: access to healthcare. But when you have something that's relatively easier to do, like a blood draw, there are a lot of lives you can save by just detecting cancer earlier. You can cure a lot more cancers than some of the latest technologies that have been developed and approved by the FDA. Okay,
great. And there are a few questions in the Q&A box. So one person wants to know, how does GRAIL work with the American Cancer Society, in particular ACS, CAN, NIH, and then the CDC?
So we are working with all of these organizations. We have studies ongoing with ACS, studies along with the NIH, and all of our studies are approved and monitored by regulatory bodies. So GRAIL is very active working with all of these organizations.
Okay. And then someone wants to know, are you an affiliate of All of Us Research from the Obama era?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. And it looks like there was one question left over from Jeri, but yeah, so I think that you've shared a lot of great information. We're looking forward to continuing to work with GRAIL to help provide education and information, and really encourage people to get screening for cancer as well as other diseases in order to help improve outcomes, right, and keep people healthy and live long, healthy lives. And here in California, unfortunately, African Americans have the lowest life expectancy, similar to the rest of the country. And now because of COVID, certainly that's been impacted. So I believe in California, there's 1 year less, and across the country, because of COVID, it's now a 3-year additional gap in terms of life expectancy. So that we hope with some of these new technologies that are coming out, including what GRAIL is working on, that will definitely have an impact on health disparities and improve health outcomes. And so, Jason, I want to give you an opportunity to make any final comments before we wrap things up for today and let people get back to their days and probably other Zoom calls that they have to be on too.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for coming and also being a part of the conversation. And I'd just like to reiterate Jeri Lacks' comments, is that we have to educate ourselves and just understand what, these significant opportunities that we have to move the needle in cancer detection.
Okay, great. Next slide, please. Yeah, and so you can keep in touch with us in a multitude of ways. You can connect with us on our social media platforms, Facebook, LinkedIn, and also Twitter. You can also join the Campaign for Black Health Equity. We are in the process of launching the campaign. Our goal is to really improve the life expectancy of Black Californians. Over the next 3 years, we have significant work that we'll be engaging in. The Health Equity Forum that you participated in today is just one of many activities that are on the horizon, or you'll see from the California Black Health Network. So stay tuned. You can go to the website at cablackhealthnetwork.org to join the campaign, support the campaign, and learn more about what the California Black Health Network is doing to impact health disparities and also achieve health equity across California. Next slide. And just a final reminder, especially for those who you may know who are uninsured and need to get healthcare coverage, we are a Covered California navigator. If you're interested or know someone who is interested and needs to get health insurance or access to healthcare, please contact us at 866-761-4165, or you can email us at getcovered@cbhn.info. Next slide. So I just want to thank everyone again for participating today, especially our speakers, Jeri Lacks and Jason Carey, for sharing their knowledge and wisdom and information with us, and being, the great people that they are in the work that they do. And thank again all of you for participating today, and have a great weekend. I think it's proper to say that now since it's Thursday. So we look forward to seeing you at our next event. So stay tuned. And we'll see you hopefully next month on March 24th.